Hi, in this video, we are going to be discussing John O'Hara's appointment in Samarra chapters 5 through 10. So last time we left off at the end of chapter 4, and really we began in chapter 5 getting a background story on Caroline English in much the same way that we did in chapter 3 when we got a background on Julian. And this kind of has the same effect for the character development of Caroline. And really, I think the first line of the chapter where Caroline says that she's already a little bit tired of Julian by the time she marries him is very telling. So we get this whole backstory on her and her childhood and her romantic history. And really, what we're learning is that neither Julian nor Caroline were each other's first choices of who to marry. So the question then becomes, why did they marry? What is their marriage based on? And kind of what can we learn about their relationship through their courtship and through their history? On page 100, O'Hara actually references Fitzgerald here and says that Caroline was a member in good standing of the community that he wrote about. So if you think back to like Gatsby and Winter Dreams, what does this tell us about Caroline and her character? O'Hara seems to be kind of condemning her, or at least her community here, as that sort of shallow materialistic sort that thinks themselves happy and superior and flaunts their wealth, all while being sort of deeply miserable and unfulfilled, as we've seen with the characters in Winter Dreams and also those in Great Gatsby, if you're familiar with that. So is this what we're meant to think of Caroline or Julian or any of the characters in the novel? Um, so Chapter 6, we really get back into three different groups of characters. We have the Englishes and their country club friends. We also get some more of the Fleeglers and also Al Greco and his kind of cohorts. And we start with Al sort of ranting about women and his really blatant misogyny. And that kind of returns us back to some of those gender themes that we discussed last time, and saying that women are nothing but trouble. And we kind of get a little bit of insight here into how women were viewed or treated at the time period, which I think is kind of nice for us to be reminded of. You know, this is set nearly 100 years ago. So what are the roles of women in the novel and how they're treated? Then we get some interaction again with the Fleeglers, the foil couple to the Englishes, much like we see with Julian and Caroline and their friends. The Fleeglers' Cloud drinks a lot, and they appear also sort of competitive and gossipy at the time. But Lute really has a conversation kind of around page 125 and 126 with Franny about his view on wealthy people and people like Whit Hoffman and Julian English. And so kind of pay attention to that passage and think about what his observations are about the wealthy. This chapter is predictably where Julian starts to really unravel. We've sort of seen this coming. His character has been sort of making choices that really hurt not only himself, but also others. He's drunk, he's selfish, he's very reckless, and he seems kind of unconcerned by it. And not only that, but he actually seems to be enjoying it at times, saying that he felt this sort of tremendous excitement when it comes to being in trouble. So what is it about his life that causes him to push these boundaries, to experience or need to experience excitement in his life in this way? Why is he making these choices? What is it about his life that's lacking that he has to find his excitement in that way? In chapter 7, we get a little bit more background on Julian, and I guess some of his background again continues to shape our opinion of him, of his character, his success, and we learn more about his privilege and if the American dream is really about, you know, working hard and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. Do we see that in Julian, or do we see someone who's sort of been handed his success and then been a bit frivolous with it, right, and reckless? This is the chapter where he does finally agree to apologize to Harry, but again, he does it with a sort of arrogance, just assuming that because of who he is, Harry will accept his apology and sort of be grateful for it. And we see that that really doesn't happen. He doesn't really forgive him, and Julian's kind of some of the repercussions of his destructive behavior start to really be felt. He really sees the impact of that. particularly with the incident, kind of his rendezvous at the stagecoach. He's both alienated his wife and also one of his best customers, Ed Charney. So it's kind of this ripple effect where some of the things that Julian's doing, some of the choices that he's making, are starting to have a real impact on his life. And we also see here that Caroline is really the one who's more popular, that people sort of tolerate Julian, but it seems like everyone kind of loves Caroline. And so I think that again is kind of telling about their relationship and their marriage. Just a few other points of interest in this chapter. As Julian's thinking about money, notice that he said he only needed $10,000, but he borrowed 20. I guess that kind of gives us, again, this indication of his not really understanding the value of money. And again, this is $10,000 or $20,000 100 years ago. So you can imagine with inflation, like the kind of money that we're talking about, and he's just sort of frittering it away and being really irresponsible with it. We also on page 162, we kind of get this abrupt shift to Caroline's perspective, and we even see her starting to unravel with her marriage. She compares love to cancer. So she's this metaphor of love sort of eating away at you until it kills you. And she even remarks that Julian has killed something fine in her. So think again about what this means for their marriage. And now we've got sort of Julian, this character who's losing so much, and we realize that there's no foundation that's solid for him to fall back on, right? So if his career is failing and his friendships are failing, and his financial situation is failing, you would assume that that would be the time that you fall back on your familial relationships and your wife and your parents, your loved ones. But we see that Julian's relationships with those people really aren't very solid. They're not built on anything substantive. So he's sort of left with nowhere to turn, right? He's been acting selfishly and thinking only of himself for so long, and now he has sort of no one to turn to. In chapter 8, we sort of see Julian's unraveling continue. He starts to contemplate suicide. He has another confrontation at a country club with a friend, and again we see here that it's really Caroline that people like. They don't so much like Julian, they more tolerate Julian. So he starts contemplating running away from his problems, like quite literally just getting in a car and driving away and starting over somewhere else. He's looking for an escape. But really, is this, anything that would help him? Is getting away and starting over going to change anything? Probably not, because of who Julian is as a person, right? He would just be the same person with the same problems in another city. So what is it about Julian that's so fundamentally broken? Where is his character so deeply flawed that he's kind of having trouble recovering from some of these events the last few days? We also get this really insightful scene between Caroline and her mother when they're talking about Julian. And Caroline, too, is looking for an escape, particularly an escape from her marriage, maybe traveling abroad. Again, both of them are trying to flee the area. They want to move or go somewhere else. And her mother really can't understand this, right? She is sort of so deeply entrenched in the expectations of what makes a happy life, and how being a wife to someone like Julian must lead to a happy life, that she really can't understand Caroline's meaning. She quite literally, the communication isn't there. So I guess this gives, again, some insight into Caroline and her upbringing and the values and beliefs that she was taught, and the mentality that she has kind of going into this marriage. And then, of course, pay attention to Julian and Caroline's final interaction in this chapter, the things that they say to each other, this sort of fighting that they have and in the streets, right? And the fact that they're more concerned about the appearance of fighting in the street and what that does to their image than they are about the unraveling of their marriage. And so I don't want to go too much into the end of the novel because I don't want to spoil the ending, but do think deeply about why O'Hara chose to end the novel this way. Why was this Julian's only possible ending? ending, or why was this the possible ending that, of all the possible endings, why was this the ending that O'Hara chose for him? And how does that help sort of solidify the message that O'Hara is trying to convey in the novel? All right, so we will pick up with more of this discussion of the American Dream in our next unit, and we'll start talking about your first essay exam next week.